Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson here with Michael Shannon, who plays country superstar George Jones in the Showtime limited series George and Tammy, and can currently be seen in Showtime's Waco, The Aftermath. Michael, first of all, welcome. Since I mentioned these two very different projects, I'll just start by asking what draws you into a role initially or ignites that spark for you? Because you've got two very different TV shows here.
Yeah, I guess they're like polar opposites, right? One's this train wreck country singer, and the other one's this stand-up FBI fellow. Um, well, that's interesting, right? Getting to explore different extremes like that, I guess. Um, I don't know. I mean, in this instance, I just find both of these people very compelling. I find George Jones compelling because he's an artist and probably one of the greatest singers definitely in the history of our country. And I find Gary compelling because he's a negotiator, probably one of the greatest negotiators in the history of our country, obviously, the FBI. And I just find like the art of negotiation to be such a beautiful art form, such an essential art form to the well-being of our society and our culture. So, but I also am drawn in by the other people I'm working with. With George and Tammy, I wanted to work with Jessica again because I just think she's the best. And I wanted to work with Abe, Sylvia, and with Waco, I really like working with the Dowdle brothers. I think they're very talented and very smart, and I think it's really compelling what they're trying to do with Waco and Waco the Aftermath. And uh, I feel like the context of what they're doing, bringing our attention back to these events in light of what's going on presently is a very valuable thing. Yeah.
I read an article where you compared acting to tennis, which I thought was really fascinating and cool because I'm a tennis fan too. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit and how do you make that comparison and what sort of environment do you need to get comfortable on set?
Hmm. Well, I imagine when I made the tennis analogy, it's just, I all the years I've spent watching tennis, it's like they're out there doing a scene together, and you're basically just hitting the ball back and forth, and sometimes you can tell by what your opponent is doing. You're like, oh, it's going to go this way, and then sometimes it surprises you, and you've got to react. And first of all, you got to be paying attention to the person across the net from you, every single move they're making, every sound they're making. I've heard that it's actually a sonic experience for these players, like they're listening to each other, and that's telling them what to anticipate. And I've just always found that fascinating. So I've always just like, oh, it sounds a lot like doing a scene with somebody. Um,
If you
particularly like,
were
yeah.
if you were to draw a comparison, are you a Federer, a Djokovic, or an Nadal on screen?
Oh, jeez. I don't know. I'm McEnroe, I think. I don't know. I it would sound ostentatious, I think, to compare myself to any of those guys. But I mean, I love Federer. I'm really sad for Nadal right now, what he's going through. It looks like he might not play the French Open this year.
Yeah.
And I was reading about that this morning. I just love that guy. He's really going through it. That's not how you want to go out. But it's kind of how Federer went out. He just couldn't recover. It was his knee, right? He just couldn't get his knee going again.
Yeah. Age
But
catches up with you.
no, go ahead. It catches up with you. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but But George Jones, he was such a complicated personality, super talented, beloved figure of country music. I think he had something like 160 songs chart, but he
Mm.
had this terrible problem with alcohol. What did you learn about him personally that you could identify with and that really allowed you to lose yourself and bring yourself into this character?
Yeah, I think sometimes the common ground maybe I found is how, as an artist, sometimes your art kind of takes control of your life and you become secondary to it. And then, you have moments where you start to think, now wait a minute, is this really what I want? Like, and it's sad because initially when you start doing whatever art form it is you're doing it with a sense of like joy and purity because you want to express yourself and you're drawn to it and you think it's beautiful. But then if you have a certain amount of success, um, it can start to kind of take over your life, you know? And that part in the show where George just like, I think actually maybe it would be just really nice to live in this house and be with Tammy and the kids, and maybe I can stop drinking and, just mow my lawn, and maybe I don't have to make all these records and go on all these tours. Like what happened, which we weren't necessarily able to recreate in the show or weren't able to recreate in the show is George, and when he married Tammy, he built a place, unfortunately called the Plantation, but it was like um it was a it was their home, but it also had a music menu. So he's like, now we don't have to go anywhere. And um and for a while it was really successful. Like he had kind of figured it out. Like, this is how I can be happy. And then it just all went to shit.
Yeah.
But it's like that's a I think that's a common struggle for a lot of artists who wind up being part of the zeitgeist or whatever, is how do I do this and but also have the life that I want to have.
And you
And,
impressively,
and then you add things like, drinking and drugs to the mix, and you're really you're really in the dark.
yeah. But you impressively did your own singing. You could have easily lip synced this whole, like plenty of actors do in these types of roles. I'm curious, what was your history with music? And because you're absolutely believable. I mean, you could have been a country music singer if you wanted to. So, what's
Well,
your history there?
I mean, to be fair, a lot of work went into it. We had an amazing teacher, Ron Browning from Nashville, who taught us how to sing. Um, an incredible, one of the greatest teachers of anything I've ever had. I did have some history with singing, but it was very different kind of singing. And I didn't sing particularly like carefully, like I was more of a rocker type guy. And country music singing's a lot more careful than that. Um, so I had to learn that. Um, I I I think if we would have lip synced the show, it would have been really hollow and false and
Mm.
phony. And even when we were doing, because when you do a show like this, you pre-record all the songs in the studio. And we went to Nashville and we were doing that, and I would hear some of the demos, and they would have, kind of tuned them up a bit with the gadgets that they have, and they'd say, "What do you think?" I said, "That sounds too manipulated. Like, I think, for what it's worth, my 2 cents is that this has to sound authentic because we're asking people to go on this journey with us, and it's not an easy journey to go on. And these people went through a lot of hell, and they caused each other a lot of hell, and it's painful. And it's like, if you're gonna ask people to do that, it better be authentic. Like, who wants to go on a journey like that that's not even authentic? That's like some phony version of what this is, you know? I find that disrespectful to the audience. It's like, don't waste people's time, you know? Nobody needs to see a fake version of this. They need to see the most authentic version of this that you can possibly muster. And that means it's not going to be easy, but then don't do it. If you don't want to do it, nobody's holding a gun to your head saying you got to do this. You know, it's a choice. And we made the choice, so we got to do it right.
And the music industry itself, I mean, I feel like George and Tammy had their own issues going on in their marriage, but when they got married, Tammy's star was really on the rise, and George's has kind of leveled out. I mean, he was already a huge star. So as she's getting more and more number ones, I feel like the industry itself almost maybe added extra pressure to them in general, because they at one point were talking about Tammy's hits, and someone says to George, "When was your last hit?" And it's just sort of like it digs at him. And then there's another moment where they say fans prefer George drunk. Happy at home doesn't make hits.
Right.
So was there that outside, pressure that really made them combust along with what was happening within their marriage?
Well, I'd like to believe, because that seems real petty to me. And like, honestly, those moments in the show are like my least favorite moments. Like the idea that George was somehow jealous of Tammy kind of makes my stomach a little nauseous is extreme. But like, I don't, because that's just so petty. It's so petty, and it's so obviously a manipulation. But it's hard for me to say whether George was jealous of Tammy or not, because I never met George Jones and I never met Tammy Wynette. The closest I got was their daughter, Georgette. And she's seen the show and she's happy with it, she's proud of it, and she thinks it's honors her parents' memory fittingly, but I don't know. I know that, like, because Tammy was like a freaking bottle rocket, her thing. She just, and George, it took George a really long time to get to the stratosphere he got to. He spent years on the road playing honky tonks, and he recorded a lot of music early in his career that was not very successful or mildly successful, but he really paid his dues. Like, he was driving all over the place, driving himself around, playing gigs, staying up all night to get to the next place, just beating the crap out of himself, which is why I think in that period you're talking about right now, he started having that notion that maybe he kind of had enough of it. He also always had really, he had really ambivalent feelings about singing for people, because, the first person he sang for really was his father. And that was under duress, that was because his father, it was the only way to get his father calmed down when he'd come home drunk late at night, So if that's, how it starts for you, I would imagine you're going to have mixed feelings about it.
He was also someone who was kind of like from the Wild West at times. I mean, he'd pull out a gun and shoot it through the top of the bus, or shoot down his own chandelier on Christmas. You never really knew what you were going to get from him. What are some of the stories that you either enjoyed the most or had the most fun playing throughout this series that you
Hmm.
just liked?
God, I enjoy the happy parts. I enjoy the parts where like it seems like there's a chance it might all work out. And I have to say, I've noticed like talking to people about the show, I feel like friends of mine or people that tell me they've seen it, I get that feeling from other people too. Like people really like the last half of the show is people kind of I've had a lot of people say, "Yeah, I love the first 3 episodes. I can't wait to finish it." I'm like, "Yeah, right. When are you gonna finish it? Because you know what's coming, and it ain't fun." So I think it's like it gets really freaking sad.
Yeah.
Although, um, for me as an actor, the part where George really basically from the part from when he starts living at his club all the way through, Tammy coming back to get him to do 2-story house, all the way through, that horrible scene where he almost shoots Peanut, and then finally getting him to where he goes to Peanut and Peanut's praying over him and saying, you know, where he's finally getting his act together. That whole suite, if you will, as an actor was just really a lot, to dig into, and very cathartic doing that part of it.
Well, the second half was sad, but it was also um it's also tells almost the most fascinating part of their story is how they never really let each other go. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me that they went through that and they still come back and go on tour together and they look happy on the on those tours. You don't know what they're really feeling inside, but they put on a good show if it wasn't true.
Well, I mean, I think Jessica and I both agree the sweetest scene in the show, for lack of a better word, is when they're on when they're old and they're on Tammy's tour bus and they're like fooling around while George Ritchie and Nancy are in counting money, and just goofing off, and he's making her laugh, and that's like such a sweet scene. And to see like these two like old wrecks, people who like have been through so much suffering, acting like a couple of teenagers, just goofing off and kissing and being like really like one of the happiest moments in the show. And then of course George winds up discovering her will and it all goes south. But
Yeah.
for that brief, 2-3 minutes, however long it is, it's just so I'm like, man, that's life at its best, man. That's as good as life gets.
Well, it's such a great series. The acting is so top notch. So congratulations on George and Tammy, and best of luck with Waco, the aftermath. And we hope to hear your name. The morning Emmy nominations come out this summer because I think
Oh,
you deserve it. Jessica deserves it. The whole show does. So Michael, thanks for taking some time to chat with Gold Derby today.
thanks for shining some light on our show.